What's going on, everyone? This video here covers me assembling and discussing the philosophy behind my UIs, specifically my Enhancement Shaman today. For reference, this guide will be using WeakAuras 2.6.0 on WoW patch 8.0, so keep in mind things may change if you're watching this in the future. So what is WeakAuras? WeakAuras is an add-on for WoW, which you can download from the link provided below. I also strongly recommend you use the Twitch app, also linked below. It will keep all your add-ons up to date easily. So why should you use WeakAuras? If you care about getting the most out of your class when you play it, WeakAuras is one of the best add-ons you can use. It gives you the tools to create and edit various audiovisual cues how you see fit, from as simple as displaying an icon when a boss is about to cast his ability of death to constructing a whole complex UI display. Because of how potent it can be, it can also be pretty daunting to get into at the start, but please don't let that dissuade you. You can run WeakAuras and simply use it to import other people's collections as you see fit, which is as easy as copy and pasting. Now, I am not a WeakAura expert, nor am I a Lua programmer, so you won't leave this video a master, but a novice should be able to pick up WeakAuras and start editing and even creating their own. A quick overview of my UI philosophy. There are three major tenets. First one is centralization. I want all important class combat information to be focused centrally where my eyes focus to keep my attention where the action is taking place. 2. Economy of space. Because there will be a lot of information in a relatively small area, this information should be organized in a hierarchy based on size and space relative to its importance. 3. Simple as possible. KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. The UI elements should convey their information in the quickest and easiest to digest form. Likewise, all redundant or unnecessary information should be reduced or removed. If the UI element does not inform a decision to be made, it shouldn't even be there. So without further ado, let's get into it. So, just as a kind of a catch-all, if you aren't quite sure how to install WeakAuras once you download it, just make sure that it gets installed into your WoW folder. So just look for your WoW directory, find the interface folder, add-ons. Once you get to interface add-ons, you can install into that directory. If you have the Twitch client, it'll handle all of this for you, making it even easier. So once you have WeakAuras loaded in and you're on the character it's loaded on, to open WeakAuras, type /WA, and this will bring up a menu. You'll see something very similar to this. On this, I'll give a brief orientation of what's going on here, but you're going to see something very similar to this. Got a new button up here. This is essentially how you create something from scratch. Then you have a loaded area, and that's where it's going to obviously load your currently loaded WeakAuras. There's also a not loaded. Currently I have a bunch not loaded just because these are all previous clusters I've created for other specs, but they've been set to not load unless you are in that spec, so that's why they're not coming up. But you'll see nothing under your loaded if you have a fresh install. I do, however, have this this sort of universal WeakAura I use on every character, and all this does is track heroism. So anytime I get heroism or bloodlust, this WeakAura will show up. And as I demonstrated, or as I mentioned before, you can import WeakAuras from others, and it's as simple as load up WeakAuras, right? Just open it up, go to New, and click Import, and you will get this area to paste text. All you have to do is find the WeakAura that you want, find its import string, and just copy and paste it into here. You'll get a quick thing saying, import this, and bam, you have it. That's how I got this one right here. This is a WeakAura created by, as it says, Amiyui. Got it from Wago.io. I'll also link that down below. That's a great place for you to get WeakAuras to import yourself. So I did make some minor adjustments. I changed it to a progress bar, changed some colors, and added some animations, but this is more or less still all their work. I just imported it all and made a couple quick changes. So we can see our loaded and non-loaded. I showed you how to import. Now let's create our Enhancement Shaman cluster. Alright, so what we're going to do is go to New. We have all these options here, and we'll get into them, but we'll get into most of them. But I'm going to create a group to start out. So let's create a group. I'm going to name it Enhance Sham Cluster. Alright, so we've created this group, but we can't really do anything with it. You don't really have any options to mess with your group until it has what is known as children inside it, but these are just the elements that you've decided to put into it. So to start off this UI, I'm going to kind of give you a brief overview of what I'm planning. So essentially, I want a maelstrom bar, my resource, kind of right about here, to where if I'm at this camera angle, it's going to fall right around, kind of below my feet, to where I can still, for the most part, see stuff I'm standing in and where I'm at orientation. So the bar right here, and then what I kind of like to do is put the two main abilities, the two signature abilities, if you will, of that class on either side of that bar in nice big buttons. Generally, I kind of put AoE type abilities on the right side, but depends on what I'm creating a UI for. Then generally underneath the resource bar will be like sort of rotational abilities, stuff that's on a cooldown that that generally is something less than 45 seconds in cooldown. And then under that, sort of in between where my unit frames are, I like to put the big cooldowns, so like stuff that is 1.5 minutes and longer. So that's kind of what I'm aiming for. So let's do that. So I'm going to go to New. I'm going to start out with my maelstrom bar, and normally, if you were to make a progress bar, this would be something to track either like a cooldown or duration of a spell. But you can also track other stuff with it. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So let's create a new progress bar. So it pops it up right in the center with a bunch of default values. I'm going to call this maelstrom bar, and then I'm going to call it enhance, just so it doesn't overwrite my elemental bar that I've already set up. So I gave it a name. Now when you select that bar, and then you have these options here in these tabs: display, trigger, conditions, load, actions, animations. I'm not going to go over all of these, but just kind of hit the major ones you'll be working with. So I want to change how this looks, so I'll go to display. The bar texture I'm actually going to keep as Blizzard. I do have other options. These are other textures, but they all came with other add-ons and LVUI, so you may not see these, but we're just going to go with Blizzard. So your left text, you have a option here where you can put in values. You have left text and right text. Right now it's set for %n, which, as you can read, is going to display the name of the bar. But this is going to be for Maelstrom, so I'm going to input, and this isn't listed here, but I'm going to input %power so that this will display my power number. Alright, so moving on. This icon, I don't want to show this. This is just as simple as a Maelstrom bar as I can make, so I'm going to turn that off. My left text is my power number, so I'm going to keep that on. My right text, I don't need that. That's a duration type thing, so I'm going to take that off. Stacks, we don't need to track stacks of anything on a Maelstrom bar, so that's going off. Alright, and before I get too much further, I'm going to take this Maelstrom bar and I'm going to click it and drag it and drop it into my cluster group here. So now, as you can see, things have changed. I now have options for this group. have a group tab. So everything I modify in this group tab here will apply to everything inside the group. And just as I've been doing this with all my UIs, I've been offsetting my groups by -60 on the vertical axis. So that puts them a little bit lower than where they come out as standard. So click that plus button and you can now see all the children inside the group that you've put in. So let's go back to our Maelstrom bar. I'm going to edit the height to make it a little bit bigger. So I'm going to go with 23 as I've been using on previous ones. I'm also going to drop the Maelstrom bar down further at to a -130. And this is the final area where I want this to land. So it's kind of almost no matter where my camera zooms in, it's kind of near my feet. So it, for the most part, leaves my feet open so I can see what's going on. Alright, and I'm also going to change the bar color. So you can click this and it will open up a color wheel and you can make it whatever color you'd like, but I'm actually going to go to my elemental cluster and actually copy that color just for consistency's sake, but you can color it whatever you want. Okay, so now we need to work with the trigger tab. So trigger tab, you can also think of this as your cause. So what causes the weak aura you've made to appear. So what I want to cause this weak aura to track is I want it to track. I'll click status. Well, first of all, I'm in trigger tab. I'm looking at trigger 1, which is the only one we have now. The type is status, and the status that we're going to track is going to be power, and it's default to you, the player, and specifically for this we're going to track Maelstrom. Alright, so now that should display my Maelstrom on that bar. It'll function almost exactly like how the power bar on your standard unit frame works. I just like having it out front and center since it's so integral to how your class is going to play. So let's take a look and make sure that works. Alright, so I have none right now, so it is accurate. So I generate some Maelstrom, and as you can see, it goes up and down. It's displaying the exact number right there. So that's working. So what's next? As I said before, I like having in this area over here, I like having kind of a big button to show like the integral ability for that class. So in this case, I'm going to go with tracking Storm Strike for this Enhancement Shaman. So I want to make a weak aura, a icon for that. So I'll click New, go to from Template, click Icon, and I want a big one, and 48 by 48 works for me. So we'll do that. Now it'll let me choose what I would like to track. So I'm tracking a cooldown, and it will populate this from the available cooldowns for your spec right now. So Storm Strike is what I want to track. So now it pops it right there in the center. I'm going to drag, before I get too further into this, I'm going to drag this and put this into my cluster. Alright, and let's mess around with the display. Alright, so first off, Storm Strike doesn't have any stacks, so I don't need to track any of that. So this default text is for tracking stacks, as you can see here, %s. So I don't need that. Get rid of it. From here, and you can of course click and drag this while Storm Strike is selected, and now you can move it around at will. I have offsets that I already have preset for how I've been doing it, and I want consistency, so I'm just going to enter them. Alright, so it is positioned and looks the way I want. So let's mess with the trigger. So when you create something, when you create an icon by the templates, it's automatically just going to track cooldown progress, which we'll get into later. But for this Storm Strike, I want it a little simple. I just want, we're going to use what's called action usable. So action usable is I call it whack-a-mole mode. As soon as this ability is able for me to use, it will display it. And as soon as it either goes on cooldown or for whatever reason becomes unusable, it will hide. So it's very, very simple. So we've applied that trigger to it, so let's test it out. Let's see if it works. So right now I can't use Storm Strike because I don't have any Maelstrom. So let's generate some and see what happens. Alright, so I have the 30 Maelstrom that I need. I can now use Storm Strike. So let's use it. Let's use it again. So it's on cooldown now. You notice it disappeared. So let's see what happens when it comes off. And it appears. So very simple. Whack-a-mole is why the reason I call it whack-a-mole is because it's just as soon as you see it, you whack it on your action bar and get rid of it. So, but I want to add a little bit more functionality to this. So let me open weak auras again, and also I also want to kind of change up how the strata here. So I'm going to go back to my Maelstrom bar. If you go down to the display tab all the way at the bottom, you'll see frame strata. The default is inherited, so it's inheriting the strata level, or basically how deep or how high up in the hierarchy of how things are displayed will this be. Inherited, it just inherits the natural group strata. So the way strata works is if, say, this weak aura here, this heroism one has a higher strata than this one, if I happen to drag this over this, this higher strata one will show up first. Should this disappear, then you'll be able to see the Maelstrom. So I want Maelstrom low just for a visual effect. So I want that low. This way Maelstrom appears as a bar, and then Storm Strike appears as a big button kind of just off to the edge of it, but still above. So let's go back to that, to Storm Strike. So I want to add some functionality to this. So Enhancement has a passive called Stormbringer. It's just randomly you may proc with your auto attacks a free Storm Strike, essentially. So I want this icon to change when I have that condition happen, when that proc happens. So what I'll do is I will create another trigger. So I'll go into Storm Strike, go to trigger, and I'm going to add a trigger. So right next to the trigger 1, you've got the little plus, so add another trigger. And what I want the trigger to be is a buff or an aura. So select aura, and what I'll do is I'll hover over the spell in the spell book, and because I'm using LVUI, it very handily shows me a spell ID. If you see that at the bottom of the tooltip, it's included in LVUI. It's very useful. You're not going to have this by default. However, if you absolutely need to look up spell IDs, you can look them up on Wowhead, and if worst comes to worst, you can always just type in the aura name. The only problem with that is there's so many spells now in WoW, and they've created so many duplicates that sometimes it can get a little bit confusing. It's usually better just to put in spell ID for exactly what you're looking for. So I want to track the aura of Stormbringer. So I type that in, just type in that spell ID. So 201845. Hit OK. So now I'm tracking that. And just kind of as an OCD thing, I always try and click this. This just means it's only going to track auras, buffs, procs, or whatever that you cast. So I'm going to click that. And it will show when I am buffed. buffed slash debuffed, but this is a buff we're tracking, so show on buff. Alright, so that's not all I need to do. I now have 2 triggers. For activation of this weak aura, I'm going to set any. So now anytime any of these buffs show up, this icon will show. But I want to do something else, so I want to make a condition. So I'll go to the conditions tab. So I'm going to add a condition to this to where anytime I have that aura that I set as my second trigger, then I want this thing to glow. Sort of like how the button will glow on your action bar whenever the proc goes off. So I'm going to mimic that by going add condition. So this is an if-then statement. It's just a simple logic statement. So if trigger 2, which was the aura Stormbringer that we set, if that's active, so active, true, then glow. And then we'll have to hit this check mark. So now, anytime we have that aura pop up and it's true, it's active, it's going, then this icon will glow, indicating that I get a free use of Storm Strike. So let's give that a try. Alright, so right now I'm just waiting on the proc. So proc happened, that's the built-in Blizzard indicator for it. I have the aura right there, and my icon is now glowing. So you'll see as soon as the aura goes off, glow is gone. So it's working. Alright, so let's get back into weak auras. So Storm Strike is done. That's the functionality I want. So let's do our other big button. I'm going to go to new, go to from template, create another icon. This will be another big icon, 48 by 48. And we are going to track another cooldown. This will be my AoE that I'm tracking called Crash Lightning. And this will be another simple one. So I'm going to drag that into my group so I can play around with it. Let's look at our display tab. Once again, this is not something that we need to track stacks for, so I'm just going to get rid of that. And I have the offset values that I want. Alright, that gets it placed where I want. Now let's look at the trigger. Once again, it defaults to cooldown progress. I just simply want action usable. This is a whack-a-mole type ability for me. So the requirements are that you have 20 Maelstrom, and this ability is on a 5-second cooldown. So that actually should do it. So let's test it out. Alright, so I have more than 20 Maelstrom, and it's not on cooldown, so it appears. So use the ability. It's on cooldown, it disappears. And comes back up, and I have a Maelstrom for it, and it appears. So that's done. Alright, so let's move on. Once weak aura loads, there it is. So now just for lack of a better term, I'm working on the underbar that I told you about. So rotational type abilities. These are going to be smaller icons, and I've got 5 abilities that I'm going to be tracking. Alright, so once again, let's go to new from template icon. I'm choosing small icon for this, so 32 by 32. Alright, so we're going to track a cooldown. Alright, what we're going to be tracking is Flame Tongue, which is, it just applies a buff to you. So we'll click cooldown, Flame Tongue. Alright, we'll drag it into our group. Let's mess with the display. There's no stacks. Get rid of those. And I already know these numbers from previous UIs, like I previously said, so once again, you can put it wherever you want, but I know where I want it. Alright, so we have it where we want, looking how we want. So the trigger is, once again, we're just going to make this a action usable. So all I want to know is is this ability available for use? And this is just a simple one. It's just a pure cooldown, 10 seconds. Alright, so I'm not going to test this one yet. We're actually just going to keep churning these out. I'm going to show you more stuff. So let's make a new from template icon 32. And we're going to be tracking, this time we're going to be tracking a buff. So what I want to track with this next weak aura is Totem Mastery. So this one's kind of a little complicated. With the Totem Mastery talent, you drop 4 totems at your feet, and each of these totems gives you 1 aura. So what I want to do is I want a button that tells me whenever I'm missing any of these auras. So what I'll be doing is, like I said, we're creating an icon. For this example, we're just going to start out by making the trigger for it a buff, and it's going to be Resonance Totem, which is one of these. We'll get more into that later. So before I start into this one, let's put it into our group. Now, to start off, let's go into the display. It's showing the icon right now for the Resonance Totem itself, but I want this icon to just indicate to me that I need Totem Mastery up. So I don't want that icon, I want Totem Mastery icon. So how do I do that? I uncheck Automatic Icon, click Choose, and now I can search their icon database. And this one's relatively simple. You can just type in Totem Mastery, and there's that icon I want. Click that, and now the icon has changed to that. This is not, once again, not a stack, and I will put it where I know I want it. Okay. Now, here's where we'll be messing around with multiple triggers. So, right now it's from the template. It put it in. It's tracking the Resonance aura, which is right here from our Resonance Totem. And it's already set to own only, buffed, aura type buff from the player. So that's one of the auras that I want to track. I also want to track three more. So let's add another trigger. Once again, we're tracking an aura, and the aura name or spell ID. Let's get these back up. So we have Resonance. The other one we want to track is Storm Totem. So let's add that spell ID. Okay, and we got our match. We only want to match our own buffed and debuffed, so everything else should be good for this one. So that one's done. Let's create our third and make that an aura. What are we tracking? We are tracking Ember Totem, which is 262399. Our own only, buffed, all that's good. So our final one, trigger 4, aura, and Tailwind Totem. So let's put in that value, 262400. Player, buff, own only, buffed. Alright, so now we have those 4 triggers. So how do we call those triggers up? What is required for activation? Any trigger. Oh, actually, let me back up. I went the wrong way with that. So the trigger we want for this is that we are missing the buff. So on show on, missing. So that's what we're saying here is we want this aura to, or this trigger to trigger when we are missing this aura. So that's trigger 1. Let me go back and fix these. Missing, missing, missing. So now, required for activation, any trigger. So if any of these triggers are missing, this weak aura should show up. So that one should be done. And once again, we'll test this once we finish the rest of these. So let's move on to the next one. The next one is going to be new from template, icon 32. Alright, we are going to be tracking a cooldown for lightning bolt. And those of you who know a little bit about enhancement are probably thinking, well, lightning bolt is, there's no real cooldown on that. No, there's not with, well, there is, but what I'm tracking specifically is Overcharge here. So with this Overcharge talent, it changes up your lightning bolt so that it now consumes up to 40 Maelstrom for more damage, and it gives it a 10-second cooldown. It just so happens to already be set to be tracking this, like whoever set up weak auras knew about the Overcharge mechanic, so let's change it. We'll add the lightning bolt, and it shows up in not loaded. So we're gonna drag it. No, maybe we won't. There we go. Okay, I don't know why that happened, but I think I fixed that bug. Okay. Alright, I'm going to make an edit then, and we'll see what I did wrong there. Okay, I don't know what happened with the template. I'm thinking it might be a bug, but so for this example, we're just going to create an icon from scratch, I guess. So go to new and just go straight to icon. And this creates a generic no value icon. So let's call it lightning bolt. Okay. I'll take this opportunity to demonstrate the load tab. So click load, and let me go ahead and, before we get any further, I'll put this in our group. Oh, so the load tab is relatively simple. It just, these are conditions for why this weak aura that you're working on is going to load. So some of the more common ones are, do you want it to load in combat? Do you want it to load only out of combat, or just all the time? Do you want it to load in a group? Do you want it to load on a certain player class, a certain talent spec, a certain talent selected? So like one of these talents here, and all this down here, you can set it on race, faction, all kinds of stuff. For this one here, let's just go with player class, shaman, talent spec, enhancement, and talent selected. Since this is specific to overcharge talent, we want overcharge. Alright, so now this will only load under these conditions. Alright, so let's go back to display. And this is not a stacked type thing, so we're going to take stack out. We're going to change the size, so this is 32 by 32. We want the X offset to be 0, it's right in the center. I'll put in my value. Alright, so we have it where we want. As you notice, it's still that mystery icon because we haven't given it a trigger yet. So what we want, this will be a little complex. We'll go into trigger, go to trigger 1, and we're going to use status, action usable, and we're going to put in lightning bolt. So lightning bolt is 187837 lightning bolt. So now that it has a spell to point to, it knows what icon to use. Alright, so action usable, that's our trigger number 1. Now if you read this though, lightning bolt now consumes up to 40 Maelstrom for increased damage and has a 10-second cooldown. So this trigger will take care of that 10-second cooldown. But I'll need to add a second trigger to do something a little special. So I only want to show lightning bolt when I have 40 Maelstrom or higher. So to do that, go to status, and power. And I'll specify the power type as Maelstrom. And I'll give it a specific amount. So power greater than or equal to 40. So now I have those two triggers. Trigger 1 is lightning bolt available? So is it off cooldown? Trigger 2 is, do I have 40 Maelstrom or more? Now, over here I'll set what is required to activate this. So right now actually all triggers is what I want. I only want this to show up when both lightning bolt is ready and I have more than 40 or more Maelstrom. So that should do it for that one. So let's move on to our next one. So our next one is going to be Earthen Spike. So Earthen Spike here. This will be a very simple one. So new from template, icon, 32 by 32, cooldown, Earthen Spike. And I'll drag this into our group. Let's check our display. There's no stacks. Put in my values. Let's find its trigger. So this is a pretty simple one. It's just, do I have enough Maelstrom? Is it off cooldown? So we can just use action usable. And that's it. That's done. Alright, our last one, Rotational Ability. We're going to go to new from template, icon, 32, cooldowns, and this ability is going to be Sundering. Alright, add that to our group. Display, there's no stacks. Size is correct, and let's put in our values. Our trigger, this is another simple spell, 40-second cooldown, 20 Maelstrom. So we'll just make it another action usable. And that's it. So now we can test the functionality of our Flame Tongue, oops, let me rename that. Rename that to Totem Mastery, because that's what it's tracking. Oh. Had a duplicate name there. Totem Mastery, our Lightning Bolt, Earthen Spike, and Sundering. So let's take a look and see if they are working. Oh, I got them in the wrong space there. 1 second. Alright, so I actually put them right where the Maelstrom bar is supposed to be. So actually I can show you a quick thing to edit a bunch of values that are the same. So I want to edit these 5 buttons and put them in a different vertical orientation. So click 1 and then control click the rest, and now I select all 5. Now with that I can go into the display tab, and any change I put in this display tab will affect all of them. So that Y offset should have been -160. So now they're in the correct spot. So I edited all of those at once. This is very similar to if you select any of these with the control function. It's also almost the same as going into group. Now I'm selecting every single thing in here, and I can make big changes on everything. So, but I'm not going to do that here. But let's test the functionality of what we did. So Flame Tongue, make sure that goes. So I used it. It's on cooldown. Pretty simple. Totem Mastery. So let me drop it. Now within, yeah, okay. So as soon as it detected that I have all 4 of those buffs, it disappeared. So another thing I'm going to test is just to make sure it goes out with range. So I'm going to run out of the 40-yard range of the buffs until they disappear. So I lost my buffs, and now it's back up, meaning I need to recast. So that's working. Next up will be Overcharge. So, as we went over before, this should only be appearing when Lightning Bolt is off cooldown and we have 40 or more Maelstroms. So let's test it out. Alright, so I have, right as I hit 40, it became available, so let's use it. Alright, so it went on cooldown. Let's make sure it works again. Yep, so that's functioning correctly. Alright, so what's our next one? Earthen Spike. This one looks to be working just fine. I can use it. I have the Maelstrom, so let's use it. It goes away. It's on cooldown. And then our last one is Sundering. So let's make sure that that one is working. Let me put that on my bars real quick. Okay. Alright, I used it and it's gone. So all of those are essentially functioning how I programmed them to. So let's go back into weak auras. So the last major thing for this little cluster I'm going to put together is I want to show my big cooldowns. And I define those as anything a minute and a half or greater. So we have 3 big cooldowns that meet that criteria for enhancement. We've got Feral Spirit, Ascendance, and Earth Elemental. So I'm going to go into Ascendance just so we can mess around with it. So let's start off with Feral Spirit. Go to New, Template, Icon, and these I like to make 40 by 40. And we're tracking a cooldown, and Feral Spirit. Alright, so I've got that, put it in my group. There are no stacks to track, and I'll put in the values I want for that. So right around here is where I want them to display. Alright, so I have it where I want. Now let's mess with the trigger. So this is where I actually prefer the cooldown progress spell display properties. So essentially this is going to show like a cooldown text for whatever you're tracking. So I'm going to keep that for this here, and only change I'm going to make is I want it to show always. So now whenever I use this ability, whenever it's on cooldown, it will display in text the cooldown remaining right there on the button. But there's one kind of minor change I want to put in. This is a visual thing. I want to add a condition to this so that whenever this weak aura is, or whenever the trigger, the Feral Spirits, is on cooldown, I want the icon to be modified. And here's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to add condition. If trigger 1 on cooldown, so trigger 1 on cooldown true, then I want the height to be changed from 40 right now to 20, and I'll do an additional property change, and the width to be 20. So now what I've done is anytime this ability is cooling down, the icon will shrink in half. So that should be good for this one right here. So I'm going to go back. Let's do our next one. So Ascendance, New, Template, Icon, 40, Cooldowns, Ascendance. Let's drop that in. Alright, no stacks. Let's get it placed where we want. Trigger. Once again, we'll be using cooldown progress spell since I like that. You'll be able to see what this looks like in a second. Show always. Now, if I didn't click always, then right now if I exit out of weak auras, you would see that it is not going to show because it is currently available. Some people like that effect. I don't really. Not for this effect, or this task of showing cooldown availability. So always. Now I could put the conditions in, I could just tap them in like I did before, but I'll show you another function. I can copy specific values from the tabs of another weak aura and paste them into another weak aura. So what I can do is copy, right click, copy the conditions for Feral Spirit, and just paste conditions into Ascendance. There, that's done. Final ability I want to track is Earth Elemental. So let's go New, Template, Icon, 40. Cooldowns, Earth Elemental. Alright, and I'll drop that in. Once again, no stacks. And let's put in our offset. Okay, trigger, cooldown progress spell, and always. And then we'll paste, we still have it copied, so we'll paste condition settings, and now our condition settings are in. So now let's take a look at what that looks like. So as you can see, Feral Spirits, all this is ready to go. So as soon as I use Feral Spirits, that icon will shrink, and it displays the text for the cooldown on it, and just works for me. It's a visual indication that when I see a shrunk icon, that means I can instantly glance and know, hey, that ability is not available yet. So let's test it for Ascendance. Yep, Ascendance does it, and Earth Elemental. Okay, so those are displaying how we want. I do want to add one last little layer of functionality to that display. So let's go back into weak auras. So what I want to do is I want to apply a progress bar to show me how long the duration of the effect that I used was. So let's give you an example. So we're just going to go to New and just straight to progress bar. Alright, I'm going to call this Feral Spirit duration. I'm going to drag it in my group, and I'm going to place it right underneath Feral Spirit, just for ease of glancing. Alright, so now let's play around with this. We can keep the bar texture. Blizzard, that's fine. Keep that. We don't need an icon. See, I just want this to be a simple little bar that just, it's a visual indication. So I don't need an icon. I don't need a left text. I don't need right text or stacks. I don't need any text. It's just a visual indication. I'm going to change the size here, so it's going to be 40 by 40, the exact same size as the icon. And I'm going to change the orientation here, so this shows how the bar changes. So I want it to go from top to bottom, so it kind of dissipates and trickles out to nothing. Alright. Now I want this to overlay right on top of Feral Spirit. So I'm going to put in the exact same values. Okay, so now Feral Spirit and this duration are going to be right on top of each other. You'll see why. One last thing is I'm going to change the background color to, this is the opacity slider here, just change that to full opacity, so not transparent at all. So now it's solid black. Alright, so now we'll change the trigger. This will be another kind of weird trigger that we'll be working with. So when you activate Feral Spirit, it's not like most big cooldowns that give you some type of buff or aura to track. It's just literally going to summon 2 pets that attack for you. So we can see from this that the pets will stay active for 15 seconds. So how can we track that? We can go to triggers and set the trigger to event. And then under event, go to combat logs. Now it's it's reading the literal combat log, for actions that happen. So we're going to tell it to look in the combat log for us successfully casting the spell. So source unit is us, player, you. I'm going to put in the spell ID to look for, and that spell ID is going to be, let me click it here, 51533. So Feral Spirit. And here's the timer that we can set for when this thing is triggered. So we saw it was 15 seconds they last, so 15. Alright, so now that should set a little progress bar overlaid on top of Feral Spirit, showing us the duration while it's active. So one last value I forgot to do, just for more visual congruity, I'd like to change the bar color to more closely match the icon color. So I'll make it like a bluish purple. Okay. So that's the progress bar we made. So I want to make 2 more progress bars to show the duration of the other 2 big cooldowns. So what I can do is, since there's not much changing I'll do for this, and most of the settings are already set, I'm actually going to duplicate this. So when I duplicate it, I have to give it a new name. So this one's going to be for Ascendance, and I'll put that right underneath Ascendance. So now I'll just need to change a couple of values. So it duplicated everything that we did. So color, all that. So whatever needs to be changed has to be changed. So I want to change the offset. I want to change the color. Let's see. I'll just go with something that kind of matches Ascendance. That'll do. Need some more cadmium yellow, I think. But anyway. I go to triggers. Now this Ascendance I know gives me a buff, so this is simpler. We'll just go to aura, and the Ascendance aura is going to be spell ID 114051. So there we go. And once again we'll just click own only, buffed. So now just simply whenever we have that aura triggered, it should trigger this progress bar. Alright, so final one. Let's duplicate. Let's rename. This one will be for Earth Elemental. Drag it underneath. And go into the display settings, and we'll have to make a couple changes. And let's see, what do we want to color it? More of a, yeah, that'll work. Okay. And trigger. Now this is another one like Feral Spirit. So it's not going to give us a buff, we're just going to have to track in the combat log when we successfully cast Earth Elemental. So we'll go to Event, Combat Log, Spell, Cast Success from us, player, and then we'll input the spell ID. So Earth Elemental is 198103. Alright, and so the duration of Earth Elemental is 60 seconds, 1 minute. So we'll change the duration. Okay, so now all of that is in place. So let's take a look at, I'm going to show you what that is going to look like. So in this example, let's use Feral Spirit. Let's cast it. So now that bar is going to show show us the duration for how long Feral Spirits last. So let's make sure that's relatively accurate. Alright, so they should be dissipating right about now. Yep, so they're gone, and then once that dissipates and is gone, we're left with our standard little cooldown display. So should be the exact same functionality for Ascendance and Earth Elemental. So there you go. So that much is done. Let me run out of combat so I can finish this up. I think that Earth Elemental put me in combat. Yep, I think I still... Okay, there we go. Last kind of finishing touches on this here. So my big cooldowns, generally I like to know when those are up at all times. So I'm going to go into those, select them all, go to load, and I just want them to always be up. So these load conditions are fine. Same thing with my Maelstrom bar. So they're all going to load whether I'm in combat or not. So I always know at a glance how much Maelstrom I've had, what big cooldowns I have available. Now the rest of these, my whack-a-mole type rotational stuff, I'm going to select all those. I just want to know about those in combat. So once again, in the load tab, just select combat. Now those will only show up in combat. So that's pretty much the end of the majority of the configuring for my UI. I will give one more disclaimer. I do not, if you are following along and have created exactly this, I am not an enhancement expert. I do not guarantee you will be doing max DPS with these settings and conditions. You can go a lot further, creating whole priority lists of when to use this ability over this, at what Maelstrom, when what is active, when this debuff is active. You can go into that in further detail. Like I said, I'm not an expert. I don't know all this information. I just play enhancement just for fun as one of the 36 specs I have available. And it's very well maybe possible I did something way more convoluted than need be. If so, let me know. But that's pretty much it for this Enhancement Shaman UI. Hey, future me here. So in retrospect, after looking back over that, there were 4 weak ores I probably could have added just to make this a more complete UI. One to track Rockbiter stacks, one to check the status of Lightning Shield on myself, one to properly track Fury of Air, and one for the Earthen Spike debuff. But that said, tell me what you think. This is my first instructional video. I have a lot to learn. What did you like? What did you hate? What did I get wrong? I know there are enhancement mains out there. Yes, all 4 of you who probably smashed their desk in anger about 30 minutes ago. If you did enjoy this, hit like, let me know what else you'd like to see, and I'll find out if I can help you with it. Thanks for watching.